Welcome back to the deep dive, customized just for you, the learner. Today, we're undertaking a really critical mission. It focuses squarely on your financial defense.
Yeah, it's something we absolutely need to talk about.
We're diving deep into the security and, well, maybe more importantly, the vulnerability of your accumulated retirement savings. We're not talking about picking stocks today.
No, not at all.
We're exposing the specific, kind of insidious ways scammers target and, frankly, try to empty your 401k or your IRA.
It's a discussion that's honestly long overdue. For so many of you listening, that retirement account, it represents decades of work, right? Discipline, saving, compounding.
All that effort.
Exactly. And maybe you've just hit that big six-figure milestone, maybe even seven figures. You start to feel secure, maybe even a little bit untouchable.
Yeah, that I've made it feeling.
But that success, that pile of savings, it basically paints a giant flashing target on your back for sophisticated criminals.
We have to start with just the sheer scale of this problem.
Yeah.
The numbers we pulled from recent FBI reports are, well, they're genuinely alarming. This isn't petty theft we're talking about.
No, it's organized financial crime, plain and simple. The FBI reported that older Americans, specifically folks aged 60 and over, they lost nearly, get this, $4.9 billion to fraud in 2024 alone.
$4.9 billion from the generation that often can least afford to lose it.
And that number, it's a shocking 43% increase over just the previous year. It's accelerating.
Wow.
And if you look at the individual impact, it gets even clearer how devastating this is. The average loss for someone in that age group, when one of these scams actually works, it was about $83,000.
$83,000. That's enough to completely wreck someone's retirement? Force them back to work, maybe?
It absolutely can. And when we dig into what kind of fraud is causing the most financial damage, you hear a lot about romance scams, things like that.
Right, those get a lot of headlines.
They're terrible, emotionally devastating.
Yeah.
But purely in terms of dollars lost, the biggest hit for older victims comes from investment scams. That category accounted for over $1.8 billion in reported losses.
So way more than other types of fraud.
By far. This is where the really calculated theft of retirement funds happens through fake investments, fake advisors, fake opportunities. That's the core.
Okay, so our mission today is layered. We need to break down the psychology, the tactics they use,
Right.
expose the specific loopholes like rollovers that they exploit, and then, crucially, arm you, the listener, with the exact steps you need to take to be the first and best line of defense for your own savings.
Turn you from just an investor into like a financial guard.
Exactly, a sentinel. Let's start with how they first make contact. What makes their approach so effective? Because it often doesn't sound like a scam initially, does it?
That's the scary part. It sounds like opportunity. They rarely come at you with threats. They speak your language, the language of finance, of wealth building. They often pose as legitimate professionals, polished financial advisors, managers of some exclusive fund, sometimes even pretending to be from your own 401k provider.
Right. Someone you might expect to hear from.
And they tap into two really powerful emotions. Greed, obviously, but also fear.
And the main hook, the main lure, is almost always that promise of impossible returns, isn't it? Guaranteed high returns that just defy market reality.
That guarantee. That is the number one flashing red light. You have to see it.
Yeah.
We constantly see pitches promising, say, 12% returns or even higher, often tied to some exclusive or limited time deal.
Where they play on fear.
Exactly. They'll say things like, inflation is destroying your savings, or your money's too safe, it's falling behind. Only this private fund can protect you. It sounds urgent, important.
And they back this up with materials that look totally legitimate, right? Slick websites, professional-looking charts, maybe fake testimonials.
Oh, absolutely. Beautiful graphs, glowing reviews from people who don't exist. But, FINRA, the regulator, constantly warns investors. You must be deeply suspicious of anyone who guarantees performance or promises sky-high returns.
Because all real investments involve risk.
All of them. Stocks, bonds, real estate, they all carry risk. If you hear the word guaranteed connected to high returns, it's almost certainly a lie. They're using a professional facade to sell you something completely fake.
So these fake products, these phony investments, that's a major category targeting retirement funds. How does that typically work? How do they convince someone to trust a platform that's just smoke and mirrors?
It's a blend of sophistication and digital deception. They convince the victim to move their 401k or IRA money into an investment that simply doesn't exist, often disguised as something desirable but hard for you to check independently, like commodities, foreign exchange trading, maybe some cutting-edge tech venture.
And they present this on very convincing fake websites or platforms.
Exactly. They look professional, high-tech, you get login details, you can go online and see your balance supposedly growing every day. They might even have, like, 247 live chat support.
So it feels real, interactive.
Very real. And here's a common trick. Initially, they might let you make a small, successful withdrawal, maybe a few $100s in profit.
Ah, to build trust.
Precisely. It makes you feel like the system works, it's liquid, and that encourages you to move the rest of your nest egg over.
And then when you try to take out the big money, the supposed profits.
That's when the trap springs. Suddenly there are problems, unexpected withdrawal fees, or maybe regulatory taxes or compliance costs that you have to pay first up front before they can release your funds.
Of course, those fees are fake too.
Completely fake. They're just trying to squeeze more money out of you before you realize the whole thing is a sham. Then, poof, the website disappears, the contact person vanishes, your money's gone.
That's terrifying. And this element of grooming, of building trust, it seems especially prevalent in the rise of cryptocurrency investment fraud. That feels like an attack on your emotions first, then your wallet.
It really is. The FBI calls it pig butchering, which is a brutal term, but it captures the process.
Yeah.
These scammers, often part of large international crime rings, they might spend months building a relationship online, pretending to be a friend, a colleague, sometimes even a romantic interest. They build deep, genuine-seeming trust.
Wow, months.
Months. Then, once that trust is solid, they casually mention this amazing crypto investment opportunity that supposedly made them rich. A sure thing.
And the scale of this particular scam is just huge, right?
Mind-boggling. The FBI reported over $5.8 billion stolen just through crypto investment fraud and related schemes in 2024. The fact that it's crypto makes it even harder because tracing the money once it hits the blockchain is incredibly difficult, sometimes impossible. That makes it really attractive for criminals.
So beyond these personalized grooming-based attacks, we're also seeing criminals use technology more broadly. Digital impersonations getting almost seamless.
Yeah, we're up against automation now. They launched these high-volume bot attacks, just hammering websites with thousands of stolen logins and passwords they bought off the dark web from data breaches, trying to find accounts they can crack.
This brute force hoping for a hit.
Right. And then there's the AI angle. Voice impersonation in robocalls. It's getting incredibly convincing. It might sound exactly like your financial advisor or even a family member in distress.
That's deeply unsettling.
It is, but the goal is usually the same. Either trick you into giving up your credentials or, and this is key for our discussion, convince you to move your own money voluntarily.
Okay, let's really unpack that voluntary movement. Because this seems to be the core mechanism where the scam pivots from just a pitch to something that looks like a legitimate transaction, at least on the surface.
Exactly. This is crucial. The scammer often doesn't need your 401k password to steal the bulk of your money.
They don't.
Not always. They just need you to authorize the transfer. They need your instruction. That makes the whole thing look legitimate to your current 401k provider, the custodian.
So how do they achieve that? This brings us to the rollover scam mechanic.
Right at the heart of it. The scammer encourages you, the investor, to initiate a completely standard, totally legal procedure, a rollover. That's just moving retirement assets, typically from an old employer's 401k, maybe after you leave a job, into an IRA, an individual retirement account.
A very common financial move. People do it all the time.
All the time. But where do they convince you to roll it over? It's usually not to a standard brokerage account at a big, well-known firm.
No. Where then?
They often lure victims into setting up and funding a self-directed IRA. This is a really critical distinction.
But why? What's different about a self-directed IRA?
Self-directed IRAs offer enormous flexibility in what you can invest in. You can hold things like real estate, private company shares, precious metals, cryptocurrency, assets that aren't typically allowed in standard IRAs.
Okay, more options. Sounds good on the surface.
It does. But fraud promoters love these accounts. Why? Because that flexibility allows the investor to hold unregistered securities within their IRA.
Unregistered securities. What does that mean for the average person? Why is that so dangerous?
It means the investment itself hasn't been registered with the Securities and Exchange Commission, the SEC. It lacks the detailed disclosures, the prospectuses, the audited financial reports that registered investments are required to provide.
So less transparency.
Way less transparency. The risk is huge because there's no required oversight, no public scrutiny. The asset could be completely fake, a worthless claim on some vague intellectual property, a non-existent mine, a patch of swampland presented as prime real estate.
Yep.
You have no reliable way to verify its value, its liquidity, or if it even exists.
And once your money is in there, getting it back out might be impossible.
Often, yeah, recovery can be incredibly difficult, if not impossible.
So, if these self-directed IRAs holding unregistered stuff are such known danger zones, why doesn't the original 401k provider, the one sending the money out, why don't they stop it? Don't they have a duty to protect the participant?
That's a really good question, and it highlights a massive vulnerability in the system. Legally, the custodian of the self-directed IRA, the one receiving the money, typically has very limited duties.
Limited how?
Their main job is often just procedural, making sure the paperwork to the IRA is correct, making sure the funds are transferred according to the instructions. They are generally not required by law to evaluate the quality, the legitimacy, or even the registration status of the underlying investment that the participant chooses to hold within that self-directed IRA.
So they just hold the assets, they don't vet them?
Exactly. They don't assess the investment promoter or the investment itself. Once your money leaves the regulated environment of your 401k and goes into that self-directed IRA chosen by the scammer, the original provider's liability often ends, and you, the investor, are left holding potentially worthless, unregulated assets.
Wow. So the process of moving the money is secure and legal, but the destination can be a complete fraud, and the system allows it.
That's the loophole they exploit. They use a legitimate process to move funds to an illegitimate destination.
Now, let's shift slightly. You mentioned something earlier that surprised me, the physical vulnerability. In this digital age, many 401k rollovers still involve actual paper checks. Why is that?
It seems really archaic, doesn't it? But it's often tied to the legal structure of 401k plans, which are usually governed by ERISA and held in trust.
Okay.
Secure electronic transfers between brokerage firms happen all the time using something called the ACTAT system, Automated Customer Account Transfer Service. It's fast and secure.
Right, I've heard of that.
But ACTAT transfers typically do not apply to distributions from a 401k trust or for transfers that aren't like for like between similar account types.
So because the money is coming out of that specific trust structure, they can't just wire it easily.
Often, no. So the default method for getting the money out becomes issuing a physical check. Usually it's made payable to the new IRA custodian FBO for benefit of you, the client.
Okay, payable to the institution, that sounds safer.
It is safer, but sometimes, maybe due to confusion, an old address on file, or rules for former employees, that check gets mailed directly to the participant, to you.
Ah, and that physical piece of paper in the mail?
Yeah,
That's the weak point.
that's the interception risk. Mail theft is still a huge problem. A sophisticated thief can intercept that check, potentially alter it, forge endorsements, and cash or deposit it fraudulently. It can happen faster than you or the plan provider even realize the check is missing.
We actually have a story, a real-world example that highlights the sheer panic this can cause, even when it doesn't turn out to be fraud in the end.
Yeah, this one really illustrates the emotional impact. We heard about a participant who logged into their account. It was right before a long Labor Day holiday weekend, a 4-day weekend.
Yeah.
And they saw their entire 401k balance, $62,000 just gone, wiped out. The transaction history showed a check had been issued.
Oh my God, right before a holiday, everything's closed.
Exactly. Decades of savings vanished. And you can't reach anyone. The participant frantically called the custodian's fraud department, but just got voicemail because, holiday shutdown.
The timing feels deliberate, like the thief planned it for maximum delay.
That's exactly what the participant assumed, that it was a professional job timed perfectly. They spent the entire weekend in a state of panic, filing police reports, freezing credit, changing every single password they had.
The stress must have been unbelievable, that fear that everything you saved could just disappear.
It has a lasting psychological impact, definitely, even if the money gets recovered. But here's the twist in this particular story.
It wasn't fraud.
It wasn't an external spammer. The $62,000 disappearance was actually due to a legitimate company-wide change in 401k custodians. The plan was moving from Prudential to Empower.
But it wasn't communicated.
It was communicated terribly. A single email notification had been sent out weeks earlier, but it went straight into the employee's spam folder. They never saw it.
Wow. So the system itself created the feeling of a catastrophic theft.
Exactly. And that highlights two crucial things. First, how poor communication from plan administrators can absolutely mimic the feeling of fraud,
Yeah.
causing immense distress.
Yeah.
And second, it brings us back to a safety net we touched on. If this had been a genuinely unauthorized transfer, a real theft, there are protections. We mentioned Regulation E.
Right. Can you clarify what Regulation E does for the listener?
Regulation E is the federal rule that implements the Electronic Fund Transfer Act. Now, even though a paper check might be involved in the distribution, Reg E provides vital consumer protections around electronic fund transfers and, importantly, sets liability limits for unauthorized transfers.
So if someone truly steals your money from the account without your permission.
If that transfer out of your 401k was genuinely unauthorized, meaning you didn't approve it, you didn't initiate it, Regulation E generally requires the financial institution, the custodian, to investigate and, if confirmed as unauthorized, make you whole. Your potential loss is usually capped at a very small amount, like $50, if you report the fraud promptly.
That is incredibly important to know. So while the fear and stress are absolutely real, there is a regulatory backstop against purely unauthorized theft, provided you act fast.
Yes, that prompt reporting is key.
Okay, so far we've mostly talked about external threats, the scammers, the thieves, the fraudsters calling you or setting up fake websites. But threats to your retirement savings don't always come from outside. Sometimes the danger is internal.
That's right. We need to talk about detecting potential issues, malfeasance originating from within the plan itself, maybe from your employer or the plan administrator.
People might not think about that risk.
They often don't. But sometimes, especially if a company is struggling financially, the employer might be tempted to misuse the funds that are supposed to be held in trust for employees' retirement. Remember, that money deducted from your paycheck for your 401k is legally separate from the company's own money.
It's held in trust.
Exactly. And dipping into that trust fund is illegal. The U.S. Department of Labor, the DCAT-L, they actually have a list of 10 key warning signs that your contributions might be being misused.
Let's go through those. What are the internal red flags the DOL says you need to watch out for? What signals potential trouble?
Okay, the first set relates to basic administration and communication. A big red flag is if your regular account statement is consistently late, or if it starts arriving at really irregular times. That suggests problems behind the scenes.
Okay, late statements. What else?
Check your balance carefully. Does it seem accurate? Or have you noticed a significant drop that you can't explain, something that doesn't match the overall market movement? That needs investigation.
And probably the most direct red flag, I imagine, involves the money actually getting into your account.
Absolutely. This is probably the most serious violation. Your employer deducts money from your paycheck for the 401k. You need to verify that they actually transmit that contribution to the plan promptly.
How promptly? What's the time frame?
The rule is generally as soon as administratively feasible, but for smaller plans, the DOL often uses a benchmark of within 7 business days after the pay date. For larger plans, it should be even faster. If you see consistent delays between your pay stub deduction and the money appearing in your 401k account, that's a major warning sign.
So if I notice that delay, what should I do? Should I go talk to HR?
You could, but honestly, the safest first step is often to go straight to the regulator. You should contact the DOL's Employee Benefits Security Administration, or EBSA. They have investigators who handle exactly this. Failure to remit contributions. It's a serious breach of fiduciary duty under ERISA.
Okay, good advice. Go to EBSA first. What about strange transactions within the plan itself?
Yeah, look for signs of self-dealing or improper use of assets. Are there unusual transactions listed, like maybe a loan from the plan assets made directly to the employer or a company executive? That's a huge red flag.
That sounds blatantly illegal.
It usually is.
Yeah.
Another warning sign is if former employees are consistently having trouble getting their benefit payments processed on time when they leave the company. That could indicate the plan doesn't have enough liquid cash, maybe because funds were misused.
What about the investments themselves? Any warning signs there?
Yes. The DOL points out a few things. Are investments listed on your statement that you never authorized or selected? That could mean unauthorized changes were made. Also, watch out for frequent and unexplained changes in the plan's investment managers or consultants. It could be illegitimate, but it can also signal instability or shady dealings.
And the last one seems kind of obvious, but important.
Yeah, if your employer has publicly announced or is clearly experiencing severe financial difficulty layoffs, rumors of bankruptcy, the risk that they might improperly dip into plan funds goes up significantly, You need to be extra vigilant then.
Okay, so that covers internal misuse. Now, while it's distinct from outright fraud, we can't have a serious discussion about protecting retirement money without touching on fees, the silent drag on your returns.
Oh, absolutely. Fees are like termites for your retirement savings. They're often hard to see, especially in 401ks, but they constantly eat away at your growth.
Huh.
The DOL has this classic example that really drives it home.
Let's hear it.
Okay, imagine you have $25,000 saved, and you've got 35 years until retirement. Let's assume a 7% average annual return before fees. If your total fees are just 0.5% per year,
Which sounds pretty low.
right, your final balance would be around $227,000. Now, what if the fees are 1.5% instead, just 1 percentage point higher?
Okay, what's the damage?
That 1% difference drops your final balance to only $163,000.
Oh.
You lose $64,000. That single percentage point in fees reduces your final nest egg by 28% over those 35 years. It's staggering.
28% loss just to that slightly higher fee. It shows why every little bit matters.
It absolutely does. Compounding works wonders for returns, but it works just as powerfully against you when it comes to costs.
So how can listeners figure out what fees they're actually paying? They can be buried in disclosure documents.
You have to look for them. Generally, there are three main types of fees in a 401k. First, there are plan administrative fees for things like record keeping, accounting, legal services. Sometimes the employer covers these. Sometimes they're passed on to participants.
Okay.
Second, individual service fees. These are for specific actions you might take, like taking out a loan from your 401k or processing a hardship withdrawal. But the biggest chunk, usually, is the third category, investment fees. These are charged by the mutual funds or other investment options within the plan. They're typically expressed as an expense ratio, a percentage of the assets you have invested in that fund, and they're deducted directly from the fund's returns.
So you don't see a bill, it just reduces your growth.
Exactly. It's invisible, unless you look at the fund's prospectus or the plan's fee disclosure documents.
And within those investment fees, there are different types, right? Like actively managed versus passively managed funds.
Big difference there. Actively managed funds have a manager trying to beat the market by picking stocks or timing trades. These funds generally have much higher expense ratios, often 1%, 1.5%, sometimes even over 2%, to pay for the manager's salary, research staff, trading costs, etc.
And the alternative.
Passively managed index funds. These simply aim to track a market index, like the S&P 500. Since there's very little active management needed, their expense ratios are typically super low, often below 0.20%, sometimes even under 0.10%.
So a huge potential cost difference just based on that choice.
Massive. You really need to compare the fees of the funds offered in your plan to these benchmarks.
What about other charges like 12B1 fees or loads? What are those?
Okay, a 12B1 fee is basically a marketing and distribution fee that some mutual funds charge. It's taken out of the fund's assets each year and used to pay brokers for selling the fund or for advertising costs. Critically, it does nothing to improve the fund's investment performance.
So it's just a drag on your return.
Pure drag. You should generally try to avoid funds with high 12B1 fees if possible. Then there are sales charges, also called loads. A front-end load is a commission you pay up front when you buy the fund shares. So, if you invest $1,000 with a 5% front-end load, only $950 actually gets invested.
Ouch.
Yeah. A back-end load, sometimes called a contingent deferred sales charge, or CDSC, is a fee you pay if you sell the fund shares before a certain amount of time has passed, maybe 5 or 7 years. These loads directly reduce the amount of money working for you.
And there's one more subtle point about fees the share class issue.
Yes, this is really important, especially for employees in smaller company plans. Many mutual funds offer different classes of shares for the same underlying portfolio. There might be retail shares, Class A, B, C, with higher fees and loads, and then institutional shares, Class I or investor class, designed for large investors like pension funds or big 401k plans.
And the institutional shares are cheaper.
Significantly cheaper. They have much lower expense ratios because the fund company saves on marketing and servicing costs for big accounts. The problem is, sometimes employers, especially smaller ones, don't negotiate access to these cheaper institutional shares for their 401k plan. So employees end up stuck paying higher retail class fees unnecessarily.
So you should ask your plan administrator what share classes are being used in the plan.
Absolutely. Ask them. Are we invested in the lowest cost share class available for these funds? It's a fair question that could save you a lot of money over time, contributing to avoiding that 28% potential loss we talked about.
Okay, powerful stuff on fees. Now let's pivot to defense. We know the threats, we know the mechanisms. How do you protect yourself? If you get that call, that email, that amazing guaranteed offer, what are the golden rules?
Rule number one, the absolute foundation. Never trust the initiator. Be immediately, deeply suspicious of any unsolicited contact about investments. Cold calls, unexpected texts, emails out of the blue, social media messages promising riches.
Assume it's a scam until proven otherwise.
Assume it's a scam, period. FitNRI emphasizes this constantly unsolicited contact is the starting point for almost every major investment fraud. Whether the pitch sounds incredibly attractive, exclusive opportunity, or terrifying, market crash imminent, if they reached out to you first, your shields need to go up instantly.
And watch out for pressure tactics. That seems to be a universal red flag.
Pressure is the scammer's best friend because it shuts down your rational brain. Never, ever make an investment decision when you feel pressured. If someone says you have to act now, it's a limited time offer, the price is changing tomorrow. Just hang up or delete the message. That urgency is manufactured specifically to make you act before you think or investigate. Another huge red flag. Secrecy. If the seller tells you to keep the investment quiet, don't tell your spouse, don't tell your regular advisor.
Why would they do that?
Because they don't want anyone objective looking at it. Or they try to get you to recruit your friends and family. That's a classic sign of a Ponzi scheme.
Yeah.
It needs constant new money to survive.
Okay, so rule 1. Never trust the initiator, reject pressure and secrecy. What's rule 2?
Rule 2. Check the seller. Verify the person or firm offering the investment. Don't just take their word for who they are or that they're licensed.
How do you do that verification independently?
First, ask them directly. Who are you registered or licensed with? Which agency? And in what capacity are you a broker, an investment advisor? If they hesitate or say they aren't registered, that's usually the end of the conversation. Walk away.
And if they give you a name and registration details?
You verify it yourself. Do not rely on links or phone numbers they give you. Go independently to trusted official sources. Use Venere's broker check tool. It's free online. Or use the SEC's Investment Advisor Public Disclosure IAPD database.
What information can you find there?
A lot. You can look up the individual and their firm. You'll see their employment history, the states where they're licensed, the exams they've passed, and crucially, any disclosure events.
Disclosure events, what are those?
Those are the regulatory red flags. Customer complaints, arbitration awards against them, disciplinary actions by regulators, sometimes even criminal records related to finance. This is essential background information.
And you mentioned impersonation as a risk. How does checking help with that?
Because scammers often use the names of real registered professionals, maybe slightly misspelled, or they give you a real name but a fake phone number or website. When you use broker check or IAPD, you compare the official contact information and history on the site with what the person told you. If there are discrepancies, different phone number, different address, claimed affiliation doesn't match, that's a huge warning sign of impersonation.
Got it. Verify the person independently. Rule 3.
Rule 3. Check the investment itself.
Yeah.
Just like you verify the seller, you need to try and verify the product they're selling.
How do you do that?
Ask another blunt question. Is this investment registered with the SEC? If they say no, demand a clear explanation why. Now, some legitimate investments are exempt from SEC registration, like municipal bonds or certain private placements under rules like Regulation D.
But those usually aren't sold through cold calls.
Exactly. And those exemptions have strict rules about who can invest. Generally speaking, if an investment being pitched broadly to the public isn't registered with the SEC, it carries enormous risk, often because of that lack of required disclosure we talked about earlier with unregistered securities.
So non-registration is usually a danger sign. Where can you check if it is registered?
The primary place is the SEC's EDGR database. EDGR stands for Electronic Gathering, Analysis, and Retrieval System. All publicly traded companies and registered investment products, like mutual funds, ETFs, have to file documents there. Registration statements, prospectuses, annual and quarterly financial reports.
Does SEC registration guarantee it's a good investment?
No, absolutely not.
Yeah.
The SEC doesn't approve or disapprove of investments based on merit. Registration just means that the company has filed the required disclosure documents. It ensures a certain level of transparency. But it gives you, the investor, access to fundamental information you need to assess the risks yourself or with a trusted advisor. If you can't find the investment documentation on EDGR, be extremely cautious.
Okay, check the person, check the product. Rule 4 gets a bit more nuanced, but you stressed its importance, especially for rollovers. Understanding the standard of advice you're receiving. Fiduciary versus suitability.
Yes, this is absolutely critical, and it's Frankly, confusing for many people because the lines have been blurry, but it boils down to whose interests legally come first.
Explain the fiduciary standard first. Who follows that?
Investment advisors, who are typically registered with the SEC or state regulators and operate under the Investment Advisors Act of 1940, are generally held to a fiduciary standard. This is the highest standard of care in finance. It means they have a legal duty of loyalty and care to always put their clients' best interests ahead of their own.
So they can't recommend something just because it pays them a higher commission.
Correct. If there are two comparable options, they must recommend the one that is best for the client, even if it means lower compensation for the advisor. Conflicts of interest must be disclosed and managed in the client's favor.
Okay, that sounds like what most people expect from financial advice. What's the other standard?
The other main standard is the suitability standard, which traditionally applies to brokers and broker-dealers regulated by FinAm. Under suitability, a recommendation only needs to be considered suitable based on the client's financial situation, objectives, age, risk tolerance, etc.
Suitable, but not necessarily best.
Exactly. The broker's primary duty is still to their employing firm, the broker-dealer. While recent regulations like Reg BI, Regulation Best Interest, have aimed to raise the bar closer to a fiduciary-like standard for brokers when recommending specific investments, the suitability framework still allows for a potentially wider range of product recommendations, including those that might generate higher commissions for the broker or the firm as long as they are deemed suitable.
Can you give us that concrete example again to show the difference in practice?
Sure. Let's use the $50,000 investment example for long-term retirement. A broker, operating purely under a suitability standard, could potentially recommend a proprietary mutual fund from their own firm that has, say, a 1.5% expense ratio and pays a nice commission. It's suitable for long-term growth.
Even if a cheaper option exists.
Even if there's a very similar S&P 500 index ETF available with only a 0.05% expense ratio, the 1.5% fund isn't unsuitable. But an investment advisor held to a strict fiduciary standard would almost certainly be obligated to recommend the much cheaper 0.05% option because it's clearly in the client's best interest to minimize costs and maximize potential returns, assuming both align with the client's goals.
That difference, 1.5% Fannie 1 assess 0.05% over decades, is enormous.
Yeah.
It really highlights why understanding that standard is crucial, especially when you're moving your entire life savings in a rollover.
It's potentially the difference between a comfortable retirement and falling short, driven simply by the type of advice relationship you're in. You need to ask any advisor you work with, are you acting as a fiduciary for all recommendations you make to me? Get the answer clearly.
Excellent point. Okay, final rule, Rule 5. Basic digital and physical security hygiene, locking things down.
Yeah, after all the verification, you still need to protect your access. The absolute must-do is Two-Factor Authentication, 2FA, or Multi-Factor Authentication, MFA, on every single financial account, retirement, banking, everything. Use it.
Why is 2FA so important?
Because even if criminals steal your password from a data breach somewhere else, 2FA provides that second layer of security, usually a code sent to your phone or generated by an app that prevents them from logging in without physical access to your device. It's a massive barrier.
And strong, unique passwords for each site, obviously.
Absolutely critical. Don't reuse passwords across financial sites. Use a password manager if you need help creating and storing complex ones.
What about monitoring?
Be proactive. Log in and check your accounts regularly. Don't just rely on paper statements. Set up alerts for transactions and pay immediate attention to any notifications about changes to your contact information, mailing address, phone number, email. Those changes are often the first step a thief takes to try and lock you out or intercept communications.
Good point. And you mentioned trusted contacts earlier. How does that work?
This is a really valuable tool, especially for older investors or those who might worry about cognitive decline or being susceptible to scams. FINRA allows firms to let you designate a trusted contact person. This is someone, maybe an adult child, a sibling, a caregiver, who the financial firm can contact in specific situations.
Like if they suspect fraud.
Exactly. If the firm sees suspicious activity, like you suddenly trying to wire your entire account balance to an unknown overseas account, and maybe they can't reach you or they're concerned about undue influence, they can reach out to your trusted contact to raise a red flag. It's an extra layer of protection. Not someone who can make transactions for you, but someone who can be alerted to potential exploitation.
That sounds like a very sensible precaution. And finally, if you do suspect you've been targeted or even fallen victim, what's the reporting process?
Report it immediately. Don't be embarrassed. Report it to the financial institution involved, obviously, but also report it to the authorities. File a complaint with the Federal Trade Commission, FTC, at reportfraud.ftc.gov. And very importantly for investment scams, file a report with the FBI's Internet Crime Complaint Center, known as IC3, at ic3.gov.
Why is reporting to them so important?
Because these agencies aggregate data. Your report, even if it feels small, might be the missing piece that helps law enforcement identify a larger pattern, connect dots between cases, and potentially track down and stop these fraud rings, preventing others from becoming victims. Your information helps build the bigger picture.
Okay, we have covered a huge amount of ground today. The psychology scammers use, the alarming statistics, the mechanics of rollover theft, both the check interception risk and the fake investment destination via self-directed IRAs.
Right, and the internal risks, too, from employer misuse, the massive impact of fees, and that crucial difference between fiduciary advice and mere suitability.
So the big takeaway for you, the listener, seems clear. Real security in retirement isn't just about picking good investments and hoping for the best. It's not passive.
No, it demands active vigilance. It requires you to independently verify anyone who contacts you about your money, to question guarantees, to understand the advice standard you're getting, and to use basic security hygiene. You are the ultimate gatekeeper for your savings.
And this whole deep dive, it really brings up a fundamental tension in our modern financial world, doesn't it?
It does. The very design of 401k, created decades ago to give employees choice and freedom and portability. That complexity is now the very thing that sophisticated scammers are learning to exploit.
The convenience creates vulnerability.
Exactly.
Right.
The ease of access, the ability to move large sums relatively easily through rollovers, it's a double-edged sword.
So, as we close out, here's a final thought for you to chew on, building on everything we've discussed. In this world of increasing digital threats, incredibly convincing AI impersonations, and these clever exploitations of standard procedures, does the convenience of having your entire life savings accessible through maybe one compromised login or transferable via one interceptable paper check truly outweigh the catastrophic risk of having it all potentially vanish?
It's a tough question about the trade-offs between access and security in the modern age, something we all need to think about.
A really compelling question indeed. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive. We sincerely hope this information equips you with the knowledge and the vigilance needed to protect your financial future.
Stay safe out there, and please, stay skeptical.